understand and read Julius Caesar in short. So I'm going to read out a story of Julius Caesar. So Julius Caesar, as you can see, the main characters: Julius Caesar, Cassius, Pompey. Then we will have Octavius Caesar, who is Caesar's nephew, Mark Antony and Brutus, Caesar's friend, and then the conspirators, those names: Caius, Decius, Casca, Cicero, Trebonius, Cinna, Artemidorus, Caesar's well-wisher, Soothsayer, Calpurnia, wife of Caesar, Portia, wife of Brutus, and Lucius. So these are the characters. We will encounter them in the story of Julius Caesar. So we'll start with the story now. Over 2000 years ago, Rome was ruled by a triumvirate consisting of Julius Caesar, Pompey, and Cassius. After the death of Cassius, Caesar became very powerful in Rome, resulting in a conflict between Pompey and Caesar. Caesar was a great soldier. With his powerful army, he crossed the river Rubicon and defeated Pompey, who fled to Egypt. When Caesar returned to Rome after the war, the people welcomed him enthusiastically. They had forgotten Pompey, who had once ruled them justly, and were ready to acknowledge Caesar as their new leader. But some Romans thought that Caesar had become too ambitious. They feared that he might wish to become king and thus the absolute ruler of Rome. Another nobleman named Brutus was a dear friend of Caesar. But Caesar's growing popularity frightened him. He thought Caesar was becoming too important and had even begun to imagine himself a god among men. Caesar refuses the crown. One day, Caesar went to watch the games at the stadium. Brutus, who was at home, heard a great noise coming from the stadium and came into the street. Cassius, his brother-in-law, was passing by, and they both wondered what the noise was about. "What is the meaning of this shouting?" Brutus asked Cassius, and then added, "I'm afraid the people are choosing Caesar to be their king." "You are afraid? Does that mean you do not want Caesar to be king?" Cassius inquired. "No, I do not, even though he is a very dear friend," replied Brutus. Now it so happened that Cassius, along with Decius, Cicero, Casca, and many others, formed a part of the Roman Senate, which was dissatisfied with Caesar. Jealous of his meteoric rise, they wished to bring about his downfall. But they knew the people would not accept their verdict. Brutus was the only other man whom they would accept their leader. Therefore, Cassius wanted to convince Brutus that Caesar had to be removed from power by force, and that the people must see that Brutus was on the side of the Senate. With this in mind, Cassius began to poison the mind of Brutus against his friend Caesar. "Brutus," he pleaded, "you and I have lived as well as Caesar, and have suffered as much as he has. I have seen him racked by sickness and trembling with fever like all other people. Once when the river Tiber was in flood, he asked me if I dared to jump into it. I did, and he followed me. But soon he cried, 'Help me, Cassius, or I sink.' And now this time, Caesar thinks he's God." Just then another cheering rose from the direction of the stadium. "Perhaps they have honored him once more," Brutus said. "Why is this man taken more often than yours, Brutus? Your name is as good as his, so why should he become more famous?" Cassius asked. By now the shouting had died down. "I will think about all you have said to me and meet you later," Brutus told Cassius. "For now, let us stop talking about this, because I can see Caesar coming." A short while later, Caesar passed by. He seemed annoyed and unhappy. Brutus and Cassius stopped Casca, who was following Caesar, and learned that at the stadium, Mark Antony, a favorite of Caesar, had offered him the crown thrice. Each time Caesar had pushed it away. Every time he refused the crown, people cheered louder. This angered Caesar. His refusal was weaker each time, and it appeared that if it had been offered a fourth time, he would have accepted it and become king of Rome. This news disturbed Brutus. He could not sleep that night as all his thoughts were centered around Caesar. I have no personal reasons for disliking Caesar, he thought. But if he is crowned and made king, there is no saying how great a change his nature will undergo. He may abuse power and forget that he has grown from nothing. He will have to be killed before he becomes too powerful. While Brutus was thinking of Caesar, his servant Lucius brought him an anonymous letter, which asked him to save Rome from Caesar. The letter further convinced Brutus of the need to take an extreme step to stop the ascent of Caesar before it was too late. Early next morning, when Cassius, Casca, Decius, Cinna, and other conspirators came to see him, Brutus welcomed them enthusiastically. The plot to murder Caesar. Secretly, they made the plan to kill Caesar. Brutus was the only one amongst them who was moved by a genuine love for Rome. The others would have killed more men besides Caesar, but Brutus did not agree. They thought Mark Antony, a trusted friend of Caesar, should also be murdered. If he outlives Caesar, we will find him a shrewd contriver and he may harm us later, said Cassius. Antony is only a limb of Caesar. Once we have cut off the head, what is the need to chop off the limbs? Brutus answered. And so it was decided that Antony should be allowed to leave, whereas Caesar was to be killed in full view at the Capitol, where he was to address a public meeting. Once the murder had been agreed upon, Cassius wondered if Caesar would come to the Capitol the next day. It had been reported that the late Caesar had become very superstitious. It was rumored that fantasies and dreams were enough to make him decide against carrying out well-laid plans. I will personally go to his house and escort him to the Capitol, offered Decius. But the assembled party decided that they would all escort Caesar to the public meeting, the murder. The day on which Caesar was to meet his death was dismal and eerie. It had rained and thundered all night. Thrice Caesar's wife, Calpurnia, had cried out in her sleep, "Help, ho, they murder Caesar." In the morning, when Caesar was preparing to go to the Capitol, Calpurnia tried to make him change his mind. "I am not superstitious by nature, but today I feel scared. A lion was seen on the streets of Rome, and graves have opened up during the night to throw out the dead buried in them. Blood has poured from the skies, and ghosts have shrieked during the night. O Caesar, I am afraid. Please do not go out today." His attendants added their prayers to hers, and Caesar might have stayed at home and escaped his death, had not Decius come in to tell him that the Senate had decided to crown him king that day. "If you send them the word that you will not come, they may change their minds. Besides, they would have laughed if they knew you were not coming to the Senate only because your wife had bad dreams last night," he said. "Yes, you are right," Caesar replied. "Your fears seem foolish to me, Calpurnia. I am ashamed. I yelled it to them. Give me my robe, I will go." On the way to the Capitol, Caesar met a soothsayer who warned him to be aware the Ides of March. The Ides of March are here, mocked Caesar. "Yes, not gone yet," said the soothsayer. Caesar paid no attention to him and continued confidently on his way to the Capitol, unaware that he was completely surrounded by enemies. They had formed a circle around him, coming close on the pretext of presenting some problem to him. Artemidorus was the only person who wanted to caution Caesar. He gave Caesar a letter and said, My suit concerns you personally. Read it first. That which concerns Caesar himself will be read last, replied Caesar. Soon Mark Antony was led away by one of the conspirators. Now Caesar was alone, surrounded on all sides by his enemies. On the steps of the Capitol, Casca brought forward a suit of one Publius Climber and asked Caesar to forgive him for some mistake he had made. He knelt down crying, "Pardon, Caesar, pardon." But the fair minded Caesar would not relent. "If I give in to your prayers and change the sentence, I will not seem constant to the people." The other senators were now on their knees, adding their prayers to Casca's. Brutus remained standing. "Will Brutus not kneel?" asked Caesar. This was too much for Casca. "Speak, hands from me," he cried and stabbed Caesar. Then one by one all the senators stabbed him, yet the powerful and brave Caesar did not fall. At last, when Brutus also stabbed Caesar, he could stand no more. "Et tu, Brute," he said, in astonishment and despair. "Then fall, Caesar," he said. Dying, he fell to the ground. A loyal friend. This attack on Caesar shocked the people of Rome. They watched the nobleman dip their hands in Caesar's blood and heard Cinna calling out, "Liberty, freedom, tyranny is dead." Afraid and unable to understand why their beloved Caesar had been murdered, they began to panic. Brutus addressed them, asking them not to be panic-stricken. "No harm will come either to you or to Rome," he promised. "Caesar had to pay for his ambition by his death," he said, and asked the people to wait for him at the marketplace, where he would come to tell them why it had become necessary to kill Caesar. Mark Antony, unaware of the plot to kill Caesar, had remained loyal to him till the very end. When he heard of the murder, he feared for his own life. Still, he came to Brutus to find out why Caesar had been murdered. Antony reached the Capitol. The sight of Caesar lying dead on the steps moved him immensely. "O mighty Caesar, are you lying on the ground? Have you all your conquest, glories, triumphs, and spoils brought this to you?" Kneeling beside the body, he mourned his dead friend. Then, collecting himself, he addressed the Senate. "I do not understand what you want, gentlemen, but if you wish to kill me also, do so now." "No, Antony, do not ask us to kill you," Brutus replied. "I will explain to you why who love Caesar have killed him. But first, come with me to the marketplace." "I too loved Caesar," Antony replied, "but I will wait to hear what you can say to show that Caesar was dangerous." Soon, everyone except Antony left for the marketplace, lamenting over Caesar's body. Antony said, "Oh, pardon me, you bleeding piece of earth, for seeming to be gentle with these butchers. I vow I shall revenge your murder." Carrying Caesar's body in his arms, Mark Antony went to the marketplace where Brutus, the great orator, was addressing the frightened, panic-stricken people of Rome. They were impatient to know why Caesar had been murdered. "Romans, countrymen, and lovers, hear me," Brutus said. "I loved Caesar as much as any friend of his could love him, but I love Rome more. That is why I rose against him. Would you rather have had Caesar and become slave yourselves? As Caesar loved me, I weep for him. He was fortunate and valiant. For that I honor and respect him. But because he was ambitious, I killed him. If I have offended anyone, it is only him who would have become a slave, or one who loved neither Rome nor his freedom. Is there anyone here who still thinks I have done something wrong by killing him? If so, let him speak now." Carried away by his speech, the citizens of Rome immediately began to talk of making Brutus the successor of Caesar. Mark Antony watched them for a while and then ascended the pulpit. "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears," said Antony passionately. "I have come here to bury Caesar, not to praise him. The noble Brutus has told you Caesar was an ambitious man. If that is true, Caesar has paid for his fault. Brutus is an honorable man. To me, Caesar was a friend and a just man. Yet Brutus had called him ambitious, and Brutus is an honorable man. He brought many captives to Rome and filled our treasury. He cried when he saw the poor weep, yet he say he was ambitious. How would an ambitious man cry to see another suffering? Yet Brutus says Caesar was an ambitious, and Brutus is an honorable man. This passionate speech made Romans change their minds about Brutus. When Antony told them that in his will Caesar had left his estates and wealth to the people of Rome, they said to each other, Caesar has been betrayed by the Senate. Remember, he refused to accept the crown. He was certainly not ambitious. Antony held up Caesar's cloak, torn by the swords where his friends had stabbed him. This is where Casca struck, he shouted, and this is the rent made by the sword of Brutus, a man whom Caesar considered his best friend. This wound killed him, honorable men, because when Caesar stabbed him, Caesar's heart broke and he fell down. We will be revenged, people cried. Oh Caesar, we will avenge your murder, they vowed. A mutiny. A mutiny broke out. Brutus and his friends became the target of the people's anger. Hastily they fled from the city of Greece. Antony's plan had worked. Octavius Caesar, a nephew and a faithful follower of Caesar, had arrived in the city. Antony met him to plan a battle against Caesar's murderers. A year passed by. The army of Brutus was stationed at a place called Sardis, and Antony with Octavius Caesar was near Philippi. By now Brutus was a bitter, delusioned man. He had realized that the people who had instigated him had actually murdered Caesar for their own gain. They were corrupt. Even Cassius, his own brother-in-law, was only interested in accepting honors and important posts. His wife Portia had died, and he was now alone. Cassius was jealous of Brutus. They did not agree even on the battle plans. Brutus thought they should march to Philippi and attack the army of Mark Antony, while Cassius thought it better to wait where they were. The enemy will come to us, and the soldiers will be tired after the long march. We will be rested and better able to defend ourselves. But the people between Sardis and Philippi love Mark Antony. As the army marches, more and more people will join them and they will grow stronger. Brutus insisted. There is a tide in the affairs of men which, taken at its flood, lead to fortune, he said. So it was decided that they would march to Philippi the next morning. That night Brutus was visited by a ghost. Speak to me. What are you? He asked. I am your evil spirit, Brutus. Why have you come? To tell you you will see me again at Philippi. The ghost vanished suddenly as it had appeared. Brutus was very disturbed. No one else in the camp had either heard or seen anything. The defeat. In the morning they set out for Philippi. A confused battle followed. The army of Brutus was divided within itself. Jealousy and distrust reigned. Orders were given and cancelled. The uniforms of the two armies were similar, and the soldiers did not know whom to attack. Moreover, they were tired of the long march from Philippi to Sardis. Mark Antony and his followers were able to defend themselves better and were victorious. One by one the conspirators died. Cassius killed himself. Brutus heard of his death and cried, O Julius Caesar, you are still the mightiest. Your spirit walks around and turns our swords against ourselves. But he did not despair and continued to lead his army till he too was defeated. Most of the men were either captured or killed, but Brutus and some of his followers escaped. When Mark Antony found Brutus missing, he ordered his soldiers to look for him. Search for him and bring him here. I would rather have him for a friend than an enemy, he said. But when the soldiers finally found Brutus, he was dead. He had killed himself because he did not wish to be humiliated by the conquerors. Antony was grief-stricken. He was the only honest man among the enemies of Caesar. The others were envious of Caesar. Only Brutus genuinely loved Rome. His life was gentle and so good. that nature can stand up and say, "This was a man, the noblest of all Romans," he lamented. Brutus was buried with all honors befitting a brave and honest man. Octavius Caesar was made the emperor under the name of Augustus, and Rome was peaceful again. So this was the story of Julius Caesar in nutshell. Hope you like it. If you want more stories from the work of William Shakespeare, do let me know in the comment, and don't forget to like and subscribe.